Welcome, everyone. I am Apostle Linda Booth, and I am here with President Steve Veazey and Presiding Bishop Steve Jones, joining you live from the Community of Christ Temple broadcast studio. We are thankful for the opportunity to share with our sisters and brothers around the world in this unique opportunity for you to ask President Veazey and Bishop Jones questions about paragraphs 7 through 9 of the words of counsel that were given to us at the 2013 World Conference. We've already received some questions, but we want to hear from you tonight. So please, email your questions to asksteveveazey@seaofchrist.org or post them to social media with hashtag AskSteveVeazey. We will share as many as possible during this webcast. We are providing tonight's webcast in English, French, and Spanish. To assist our excellent translators, we will try to remember to talk slowly and pause after the questions so translators can better able to proceed with the translation of the answers. For the more than 495 people or groups joining us right now from at least 11 countries, we're going to look deeper into the paragraphs that were given to you during the President's address. Steve, are you ready for questions?
Sure.
Well, the first question I've already looked actually comes from something you talked about in the President's address, and that has to do with your reference to 2 Corinthians. This question comes from my scrolling. It just moved. This is one of the wonders of technology. It comes from Richard, and it's sent to you by email, and he asks, you told the story about the Macedonians giving to their true capacity. What kind of giving is that expressed in the church today?
Sure. A lot of good examples of that kind of giving in the church today. I think about in Central America last December, we sent out a communication about the need to pray for people who were struggling with hunger in different nations. And throughout the Central America Mission Center, they prayed. But as they were praying, they said that they had a sense that they should do something more. And in a letter they sent to us, they said, so they organized an offering and sent the money to support our World Hunger Ministries, and they said they had great joy in being able to participate in that way. So that's one example. I think about a message we just received from India, where one of our Mission Center financial officers organized the 100 congregations under his responsibility to begin to give to world mission tithes. And they've now begun to do that, and that's so exciting and so inspiring. There's so many stories like that we could tell.
Here's another question from Jennifer. She sent it in through email, and it's for Steve Veazey as well. What is the church doing to help people like me figure out our true capacity for giving?
Well, I think what we're doing is on a regular basis lifting up the concept of giving to one's true capacity, because it's an ongoing journey of reflection as we grow in our discipleship and respond. We have articles in the Herald, in our education material. We talk about true capacity and how to identify one's true capacity. So all of that. We also have a mission funding team. And on that team, we have ministers who have special expertise and training in budgeting and financial planning and estate planning. And that service is offered by the church free of charge to anyone who would like to explore those topics. In terms of priesthood, in the materials for the education of priesthood on covenant principles for faithful ministry, we include an emphasis on priesthood exemplifying generosity and sharing equally. We really look to the priesthood to help shape the culture of generosity in the church. Also, we're starting a pilot with the high priest quorum. They've offered to lead the way in terms of increased generosity. So we're inviting all priesthood, high priests in the church, to participate in a pilot where they fill out an online survey, they watch the address tonight, and then they participate in a series of reflections and spiritual formation activities that help them go deeper in their understanding of God's grace and their own capacity to be generous in response to that grace. So I'd like to encourage all of the high priests to participate, fill out the survey, and join in the conversation that we'll be having in the weeks ahead. So after that pilot is finished, then we want to expand that emphasis to all the priesthood.
Excellent. Here's a question that's just come in from Daniel, and I'm going to give that to you, Bishop Jones.
Okay.
It says the statement on tithing said that giving to church affiliates and other charities, it's not tithing. You want to comment on that?
Yeah, this is really important that we have a clear understanding and definition of tithing, because in order to know our true capacity, we need this kind of definition. And so both in the words of counsel and in the interpretation of the words of counsel by the presiding bishopric, we want to be very clear about what is and what is not tithing. So community tithes is not tithing. But what is tithing? Tithing is offerings to local ministries. Local ministries meaning congregations and mission centers. Tithing is world ministries, mission tithes. And that's expressed through the 5 mission initiatives. That's tithing. Now, after tithing, a high priority for our giving should be to our church affiliates. Our church affiliates like Graceland University, Outreach International, Peace Pathways, Historic Sites Foundation, Dome and Spire Oregon Foundation. Our church affiliates need our support, but those contributions are not tithing. And then contributions to charitable organizations in your community. Those are important also, but those also are not tithing. So let us be clear, and that will help us understand our true capacity.
Thank you, Steve. Here's a question through email from Beth, and I'll give it to you, President Veazey. It asks, what is the financial situation of the church?
Well, that's a question that seems to come up each time, and I'm glad it does, because that gives us opportunity to update the church, even as we did tonight. As I said last April, it's a complex question. It really has 2 parts. So about half of our church income comes from various assets, investments that are managed like endowments, and all of those are very sound, and they're producing the income that is anticipated. The other part of our income, however, comes from the tithing income, and that's what we've been talking about mostly tonight. 50% of our income for world ministries comes from tithing, and that income has not been meeting the levels that we had projected. As a result, as I mentioned last time in my address, we have moved to what we call a management budget. As we watch the tithing income trends, we have begun to reduce expenses, and we asked the presiding bishopric to do a comprehensive analysis that would result in a 5-year financial plan for the church, looking at all the different sources of income, all the obligations and expenses that we could anticipate. As a result of that, we've determined that based on the tithing trends and also the obligations for the future, such as the pensions and post-retirement benefits, health care costs. Our expenses are increasing, that we need to move to a balanced budget, which is the reduction of additional expenses in all categories of our budget. So the long-term future of the church is we're going to continue to align our efforts to the 5 mission initiatives. Right now, income through World Ministries tithes is not sufficient to meet our budget. Therefore, we're going to need to reduce expenses.
Thank you, Steve. This comes from Ted, who describes himself as a young adult congregational leader and priesthood member, and it came through email. He says he is worried, and I'm going to ask you, Bishop Jones,
Thanks.
he says he's worried about the long-term viability of local congregations, so he has been tithing more to the local ministries than to the world, even though he fervently supports the mission initiatives. He asks, how can the guidance on tithing help me balance my concern for local needs with my desire to support the worldwide church?
Thanks, Ted, for the question. And I'm going to assume for a minute that what Ted is talking about is sharing equally. I want to draw your attention to the reference in 162, 7D, that talks about the need to have support for our local congregations, that everybody needs a spiritual home, and that we need to take care of that. But remember, the scripture also says that the church goes to those far-flung places around the world, and there are persons in those places that also need a spiritual home. And so we are responsible also, and it says, to share equally in the outreaching ministries of the church. So here's what we need to do. I'm going to use U.S. dollars. For every U.S. dollar that is given right now, 65 cents stays locally for local ministries. 35 cents comes for world ministries, to those far-flung places that we need to go. President Veazey was clear tonight. We're not asking you to reduce your 65 cents, but instead maintain that for ministries locally. But start to increase the 35 cents. Start increasing it so that someday we're not giving $1. We're giving $1.30. And just think, if we could do that, worldwide ministries around the world to those far-flung places would receive about another $9 million for mission. Wouldn't that just be terrific? That's what we really want you to do. Not reduce for local, but begin to increase incrementally for worldwide ministries.
Thank you, Steve. I'm going to ask a follow-up question of you, President Veazey. So do you have any examples of congregations or individuals you know that give true to capacity but do a shared equal giving?
Sure. There are a lot of examples. One that I'd really like to share about tonight is a letter I received recently from a church member who happens to be imprisoned. And in prison, he works at a job, and his income is very minimal. Yet, he wrote me and said that he was so committed to the mission initiatives that he had reduced his spending in other areas for little things he could buy so that he could give equally to local ministries in the area he's from and to worldwide ministries. Now, for me, that's exceptional. It's inspiring. This good brother's life is changing as he is responding to the gospel, as he's caught the vision, and he's demonstrating that through his generosity, and he wanted me to challenge the church to do the same.
Thank you. Bishop Jones, I'm going to ask you this question from Anita, sent through email.
Sure.
She asks, what do you think has caused the decrease in giving to world mission tithes?
Thanks, Anita. There's not one factor. I think sometimes we believe it's just one thing. There are several factors that have contributed, and so let me just kind of cover 2 or 3 of those. The economy and the effects of the Great Recession are still on us as a church. People lost their jobs, pensions affected, houses in terms of their value went down, pensions and their value went down. So we still feel the effect, and our members feel the effect of that. Also, our membership is getting older. Our contributors are declining and getting older, and that affects us because many are on fixed incomes. We've also had some reaction from decisions made at national conferences. And we know that operating your congregational facilities and campgrounds cost more. And so those all affect tithing and its decrease, I think, Linda.
Okay, thank you very much. This comes from Terry from California, and it's to President Veazey. He wants an update on your plans that you shared during the last address to visit Israel and Palestine with Churches for Middle East Peace.
Well, appreciate that question. We're monitoring the security situation very carefully because a lot has happened in the area recently. However, we're definitely going. Our plans are in place. Just because a situation becomes more difficult doesn't mean we withdraw from our peacemaking efforts. So we'll be going with other Christian leaders and meeting with other faith leaders and governmental officials to have very important conversations about ways forward for peace in the Middle East. I'd also like to share with the church that in February, Kathy and I are going to India for the 50th anniversary celebration of the church in India, and we're really looking forward to that trip. And I've been told to prepare on Sunday morning, the celebration service, that there will be at least 10,000 people present. That's 3 times the size of World Conference. And that's going to be a significant event in the life of the church. We hope to capture some video footage and share the celebration with the whole church.
Yes, we're making plans in communication to send a team of people over to take those photographs. Very exciting. Yeah. Here's a question from Dick. It's sent in by email. He says, in paragraph 8 of the Words of Counsel, you share what he referred to as a legalistic interpretation of tithing. Is a law required to focus and balance a steward's financial generosity for mission?
Well, that's an interesting question. Let me begin by saying when I'm involved in receiving and sharing words of counsel, I pay very close attention to what the Spirit persistently is prompting. And I really wrestled with that phrase because I was concerned it could be interpreted that way. But despite my concerns, the Spirit continued to press me to share it as I did, which is, if a law is needed, then let these principles serve that purpose. And the more I thought and prayed about that, it occurred to me that it's also an expression of God's grace to give us certain direction, certain points of reference to help us grow as disciples. So I really don't see it in legalistic terms. We struggle to understand how to manage our money and focus our funds on priorities that really make a difference as opposed to what we want and desire for ourselves. So I think that particular passage is helpful for some people. Maybe there are others who don't need that kind of guidance. And I think that will become evident in the nature of their response.
Yes, thank you. Also, I want to let you know that we now have 24 different nations joining us on the webcast, which is more than we had on your April address, which is very exciting.
That surpasses.
Yes, it surpasses, yes. Here's an email that has our Twitter question that's just come in from Ryan, and I'm going to ask you, President Veazey, how do we weave the spiritual practice of tithing with the spiritual practice of mission?
Well, I can only reflect out of my own experience that I can't separate the two. As President Emeritus Smith shared with us in Words of Revelation, we should share the gospel as widely and as far as the dedication of the saints, especially through the exercise of our temporal stewardship, will allow, so they're one and the same. So when Kathy and I talk about our tithing response, we consider the local needs, the mission center needs, then we think about the mission initiatives and all of the experiences we've had and the ministries that we're aware of, which are making a difference in the world. And then we respond to that by our tithes. And the tithes become much more than an offering of some money. They become a part of our response, our total commitment as disciples. And we find joy and spiritual growth in this act of sharing resources that have come to us through the grace of God, sharing those resources so others can experience the grace of God and Jesus Christ in their lives. So that tithing offering is a spiritual discipline, just like prayer or meditation or scripture reading or dwelling in the Word. It helps us grow spiritually.
Thank you, Steve. There's a question here that came in through email from Tahiti. It's been translated from French, from Kahe Alani. And so I'm just going to ask the question, and you can decide who wants to answer this one. For a priesthood member who doesn't work, how can he or she contribute financially?
Well, as we shared in the statement on tithing, and as I shared in my address, we recognize that our members live in greatly varied personal situations, greatly varied economic situations. And so our understanding of tithing really focuses on the principle of the desire of one's heart and one's true capacity. So in the statement on tithing, it says, if a person or a family doesn't have the resources that they need in order to respond in a certain way, then any offering or the offering of any item. I know when I've traveled in French Polynesia, people have shared with me beautiful items of value to them, and the offering of one's life. And I want to emphasize that, the offering of one's life. When I was apostle in Africa, sometimes members would simply put both their hands in the offering plate when they had nothing physical to offer. And I finally asked what that meant, and it meant I am offering my life. And that's really the heart of the response. No one should feel bad about that. Generosity is about joy.
Yes. Thank you very much. We're getting several questions on email and Twitter. They're very similar, so we're trying to combine them. So here's one from Sean, a young adult, on Twitter, and Justin on email, and I'm going to give it to you, Bishop Jones. It says, will there be materials for youth on disciples' generous response concepts?
Thanks for the question. If you right now go to the Presiding Bishopric webpage, you will see resources for adults and youth on disciples' generous response principles. There are wonderful materials regarding which are entitled Good Sense and Dave Ramsey and a book called 3 Simple Rules. And those are wonderful resources for families and individuals. Also in our pre-baptismal information, we have wonderful information about Disciples' Generous Response Principles. I would draw your attention to that webpage in order to find what might work for you. You bet.
Also, we have Jack and Jen videos.
We have good Jack and Jen videos that are wonderfully done and can be used personally and in the congregations.
Thank you. This is an email from Rebecca, and I'm going to give it to you, President Veazey. She asks, is there a relationship between the words of counsel given at the 2013 World Conference, the new tithing definition presented in the President's address, and the church's current financial situation?
That's an interesting question. So I can only share from my perspective. And my perspective is this. We need to remember that the words of counsel were first shared with the church at World Conference in April of 2013. And I also know that it was many months in advance that the Spirit was working with me in terms of understanding and articulating those words of counsel. So that was my experience with them. And at that time, current realities were not necessarily in focus. I was responding to my best sense of the Spirit's guidance. And as I understand it, and in conversation with Bishop Jones, the presiding bishopric is responding to the words of counsel.
Mm-hmm.
Thank you. This is from an email question from Dave to President Veazey. The need to increase giving appears to be urgent. How do you rank the urgency of the mission initiatives? What's number one, and so on?
Well, regardless of a sense of urgency in terms of giving, I would say the mission initiatives should have a sense of urgency because the world desperately needs the witness, the message, the ministry of Jesus Christ. So there's, in a way, always a sense of urgency involved in our capacity as a church to pursue the mission initiatives. As I've said in the past, I think I would have to be consistent in saying now, I don't rank the mission initiatives in a priority list. The mission initiatives are statements that help us understand the whole mission of Jesus Christ as described in Scripture. So as a church, we're always working on all of the mission initiatives. Each congregation needs to determine how to do that. They are all a priority, and the sense of urgency is the world needs the message and the ministries that we have to share.
Yes. This is from an email question from Eleanor I'll give it to you, Bishop Jones. What can we do to address the financial needs of the church?
Well, again, thanks for the question, Eleanor. It's important, I think, that we go back to the answer I gave before, and that is the answer of sharing equally. Again, as President Veazey said in his address, we do not want you to reduce your giving locally, but we want you to be able to increase the giving to worldwide ministries so that we can have those ministries that we need to offer through the mission initiatives all around the world. And so we talked about 65 cents and 35 cents, trying to make sure we understand that the 65 cents is, again, the local expression of tithing, and continue to give that for the local needs. But we need to increase the 35 cents. And if we move that to 65 cents, it could be an additional about $9 million for worldwide mission around the world. And wouldn't that be wonderful?
It would be wonderful. Yeah. Here's an email question from Shelby, and she has a comment. I don't know who she's talking about, but she loves the ties. So good job. Here's a question I'll give to President Veazey. Are materials available to local churches to help them realize what is responsible spending on a local level to help members feel more comfortable giving equally to both local and worldwide ministries?
Well, I think the answer to that lies in what Bishop Jones shared earlier. If you go to the Presiding Bishopric's webpage on the World Church website, there is listed a number of resources that have been reviewed by the Presiding Bishopric and are recommended by the Presiding Bishopric for children, youth, young adults, and adults. And so I simply emphasize the availability of those materials and the need for those materials to be used both in families and in congregations.
I'm going to ask you another question, President Veazey. It's from email from Jason. Would you please share some of the exciting opportunities that are before the church that we can't currently do because of lack of funds? Things that would inspire us to give.
Well, I really appreciate that question. Again, that gets to the heart of the matter. On a global scale, through the Council of 12, we're aware of 10 to 12 nations where we have individuals who are inviting the community of Christ to come and share our witness. And we cannot go to those places if we don't have the resources to both begin and sustain the development of the church there. So that's a very obvious one. In Western nations, we have the understanding and experience we need to help congregations revitalize and engage in mission. We're doing a pilot now called Leading Congregations in Mission, and that followed the Co-Mission Pastors Initiative. And through these two pilots, we understand how to help congregations, but we need more full-time staff to work with congregations to help them implement those insights. And we're not able to do that if we don't have the resources. We also know that there are whole populations in some nations that are not currently being attracted to the church through existing congregational styles and models. We can plant new congregations, and we know how to do it. We have some good examples, but those efforts will have to be moderated and delayed until we have the resources to do that.
Yes. Here's another question for you, President Veazey. It comes from Twitter, and it comes from Zach. What is the connection between the individual and personal experience of tithing and the whole community expression of giving?
Well, that's a fascinating question. Yeah. Because in our theology, we seek a balance between individual response and community response. And obviously, individuals make up communities. So individual response is the desire of the heart of the disciple. As disciples begin to respond generously, then in congregations, the congregation may have added capacity to support local mission center and worldwide ministries of the church. And we are starting to have some congregations that have been blessed with financial resources identify some of those resources to contribute as a congregation to support our worldwide mission. And I think that's an excellent example of a spiritual practice as a congregation to express generosity that supports mission.
We are getting a lot of questions coming here at the end of our live Q&A. Yeah. So I'm just going to end with one question particularly, and that's for President Veazey. President Veazey, can you share your most meaningful ministry experiences since you had your last president's address?
Beside my grandchildren, my grandchildren, yes, there are so many. I think about all the reunions I attended this summer, and it's always a joy to be with the people of the church, to hear their testimonies, also to hear their struggles, their hopes, and be together in community. And I was amazed at the number of congregations that are engaging in the mission initiatives and making a difference in their communities and making a difference in the lives of people. IYF in Spectacular, International Youth Forum, being with the young people of the church and experiencing their energy, their joy, and they get it. They get the mission of the church, and they're anxious to move on with it and to hear their hopes about the future. I would have to say, now I'm a missionary at heart and always have been. This summer, through the graciousness of others inviting me to share in their experiences, I had the joy of baptizing 4 people. 3 adult converts to the church, and 1 beautiful child, a young lady who was making her commitment to the Lord and to the church. And it's good to get your baptizing clothes wet. And that's what it's all about. That's everything we're talking about, is making disciples with Jesus Christ, growing disciples who are involved in the mission of Jesus through the ministries of community of Christ. And what a joyful experience to participate with individuals who are discovering the gospel and the church as if for the first time. And after the baptism of this young girl, she was just glowing. And she looked at me and just said, "Thank you, thank you, thank you." And she wasn't thanking me. She was thanking God and the gathered congregation for the experience that she was having. It was wonderful.
Yes.
Yeah, terrific.
And that is what we have joy in our generosity, is when we hear those stories of people who are being transformed because of the ministries of Community of Christ throughout the world. Yeah. I want to thank both of you, my brothers, Steve and Steve, for both sharing this evening, but also for your rich leadership and the ministry that you provide. It's a privilege to serve with both of you. And I want to thank you, President Veazey in particular, for your heartfelt honesty and your Christ-like way that you lead the church, for your dedication to daily disciplines that bring you closer to the Holy Spirit, and for your challenge to each of us to go more deeply into our discipleship and to become true and living expressions of Jesus Christ. Thank you, both of you. And thank you to all of the congregations, groups, and individuals who have gathered with us to be part of that journey. We appreciate your questions, and we appreciate all that you do to make Christ's mission come alive in your communities around the world. Remember this. This is the second in a series of addresses dedicated to going deeper into the words of counsel as we prepare for the 2016 World Conference. We look forward to joining with you on April 12th, 2015 for the next President's Address as we continue to prayerfully reflect on the words of counsel. As we go more deeply into those words, may they continue to shape us as a community dedicated to Christ's mission, our mission.